On that last day of October, roommates Adriane Insogna, Leslie Mazzara, and Lauren Mianta spent the night handing out candy to children who rang the doorbell at their Dorset Street home. It was Halloween in the year 2004, and the tranquility of Napa, California, would be shaken by a terrible crime. By 11 p.m., the lights in the house were out and all three had already entered. Adriane and Leslie went to their rooms upstairs and Lauren went to her room downstairs. Everything was normal until 2 a.m., when Lauren was awakened by the sound of breaking glass and a terrifying scream afterwards. She got up silently from her bed and went upstairs to find out what happened, but stopped when she heard the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs towards her. Terrified, Lauren ran out the back door and hid in the backyard. At this moment, she heard the sound of someone coming out of the basement window. After a few minutes completely paralyzed, she decided to go inside. She went towards her friend's room, hearing Adriane's desperate cry. Leslie was lying on her stomach and there was a lot of blood. Adriane was crouched behind the bed, still alive but very cold. There was so much blood on the floor that when Lauren entered the room, she slipped and fell. Upon realizing the macabre situation in front of her, she immediately tried calling 911, but the phone was dead, so she grabbed her cell phone to call for help, while running to her car that was in the garage. Arriving at the garage, she was afraid to enter as she believed that the person who attacked her friends was still in the area. Upon receiving the call, paramedics quickly arrived at the residence. Leslie died at the scene. Adriane, on the other hand, was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately ended up passing away due to her serious injuries. Both were pierced numerous times by a sharp-bladed object, which authorities believed to be a knife. Lauren told the police that she hadn't seen anyone, but that she heard the time her friends were attacked. During investigations, officers searched the crime scene and found cigarette butts outside the house. Upon talking to Lauren, the officers discovered that neither she or the two victims smoked. With that, they believed that the criminal had smoked a cigarette while waiting outside for their friends to go to their rooms to sleep. They also found blood at the scene that didn't belong to any of the friends. This indicated that the criminal had probably cut himself during the attack. The next day, when the news about the crime spread, the people of Napa went in shock, and as the person responsible for the crime was still at large, the residents became very afraid, and rumors began to circulate. People needed a justification for what had happened, and some residents suspected that the three friends were involved in criminal activities, and even without any proof, this rumor was growing more and more. Leslie worked at a winery that belonged to the famous Italian-American filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, responsible for the Godfather franchise and also the uncle of the famous actor Nicolas Cage. As there were always rumors that Francis was connected to the Italian mafia, people began to speculate that Leslie had ties to local mobsters and that this would somehow have consequences for her and her friends. Well, none of these rumors had any basis in truth or facts. For the police, Leslie was just the main target of the criminal. She was the first to be attacked, and with great ferocity. The evidence indicated that she was sleeping when it all happened and tried to run away from her attacker as soon as she woke up, heading towards Adriane's room. Adriane, it seems, heard the attack and rushed to her friend's defense and also ended up getting hit in the process. The police began investigating the backgrounds of the friends, as well as their circle of friends and possible ex-boyfriends. The objective was to find any indication that any of them had an enemy. Detectives discovered that 16-year-old Adriane Insogna had been in a serious car accident. Her vehicle overturned 3 times and Adriane hit her head on the sidewalk after being thrown out of the window. Doctors said she survived by a miracle. When she returned to school a few months later, although she suffered from memory loss, she healed and excelled in school, earning a scholarship to attend California Polytechnic State University, thus achieving her dream of becoming a civil engineer. After college, she was hired by the Napa City Council. Shortly after being hired, she started dating a guy named Christian Lee. Their relationship was troubled, and they kept breaking up and getting back together. She kept telling him that she wanted a more serious commitment, but he said he wasn't ready. Adriane ran into Christian on Halloween night when she was handing out candy to the kids. The two left and she returned home around 10 p.m. They had argued over her desire for a more serious commitment. That was the last time Christian saw her alive. Despite the little problem with her boyfriend, Adriane led a quiet life. She had a few friends but was liked by all, despite being considered very shy and not partying much. Leslie Mazzara, unlike Adriane, had many friends and was extremely outgoing. In her hometown, she was chosen as a beauty queen and had been thinking about becoming a teacher and a lawyer, but seemed undecided about it. Her mother, Kathy, had gone to Napa and invited her daughter to spend the summer with her, where she worked at a winery. From the moment Leslie arrived in Napa, she loved the place. When her mother left, she decided to stay and was hired by Francis Ford Coppola after a referral for her former employers. It is said that the young woman liked the city and working at the winery so much that she began to consider the possibility of one day building a career in the wine business. For Leslie's family, the young woman was always very thoughtful and never got involved with the wrong people. And because of that, they were carefree. After all, she was a smart girl and Napa was a safe and family community. In terms of relationships, Leslie didn't seem like the type who liked serious, long-lasting relationships. According to reports, she even dated two men at the same time, and both were much older than her. People even joked that she was a heartbreaker, but Leslie said it wasn't intentional, and things were just the way they were. During investigations into the crime, Leslie's computer was searched, and then email from an ex-boyfriend of hers caught the attention of the police. The two had already broken up many years before the crime, after he asked her to marry him and she turned him down. However, detectives discovered that he would have looked for her a few days before the crime. Another man, also her suitor, would have paid for a luxurious trip on a cruise for the young woman and even given her a car as a gift a month before the crime. At that time, she had traveled to South Carolina for a friend's wedding, and there received several gifts from countless other suitors who wanted something more with her. It wasn't uncommon to see her arguing with one of her lovers on the phone, but she never seemed worried or even threatened before. Between Adriane and Leslie, it seemed far more likely that Leslie was the criminal's intended target. Detectives believed that she might have come across someone who became obsessed with her. This is because the crime was clearly not random. Nothing was stolen, and the perpetrator would have waited outside for several hours before entering the house. It was clear that everything was premeditated. Police interviewed more than 1,500 people and sent several DNA samples to compare with the blood found outside the home, but no matches were found in the police database. They interrogated Christian Lee, the guy Adriane was seeing, and asked for a DNA sample. In addition to him, the police also questioned and collected DNA samples for a man who had already had some kind of relationship with Leslie, but even so, they didn't get anything. The lack of suspects and arrests frustrated the victims' families and friends, who felt they had to do something on their own. Then, they hired a private detective, but just like the police, he couldn't come up with anything that could help find the criminal. Time passed, and in September 2005, almost a year after the crime, the local police decided to publicly disclose the evidence about the cigarette butts they had found and the fact that they were Turkish Gold, a variation of Camel cigarettes. This brand had been on the market for a short time and was not yet sold in the city of Napa. Tests revealed that the DNA on the cigarette matched the male DNA found outside the home. The police felt that disclosing the brand of cigarettes that were not well known because they were new to the market would result in someone giving away relevant information to them. Shortly thereafter, on a Tuesday night, the detectives working on the case were getting ready to leave when one of Adriane's best friends, along with her husband, a man named Eric Couple, and some of her family members showed up with relevant information regarding the case. As soon as the detectives stopped to listen, Eric looked at them and simply confessed to the crime against Adriane and Leslie. Eric Couple's arrest was a mixture of relief and devastation. Adriane's mother, Ariane, was shocked and horrified to learn that her daughter's best friend's husband was responsible for the crime. For Leslie's family, there was a sense of relief that Leslie was not the only target, but equally confused that Eric didn't know Leslie. The police took Eric in for questioning and took a DNA sample. When asked about his motivations, he said he would only say something in the presence of a lawyer. Shortly afterwards, the result of Eric's DNA analysis came out, and it was confirmed that the samples collected from cigarette butts and the male blood found in the house belonged to him. In January 2007, Eric Koppel was put on trial, and after a plea deal not to take capital punishment, he was sentenced to life in prison. His wife declared publicly that she supported her husband, going so far as to tell him that there is nothing in this world that would make her love him less, not even such a brutal crime. Still at the trial, Eric apologized to Leslie and Adriane's families, and even cried during his testimony. According to him, after the death of his grandfather, he became very depressed, and this made him dive into alcohol and heavy narcotics. He said that that night he intended to take his own life, but he had too much to drink and simply decided to break into his friend's house. First, his intention was to force relations with Leslie, as he always found her attractive. However, everything got out of hand when Adriane heard her friend's screams, and he was forced to take their lives. Although Lily declared that she would always love Eric and that nothing in the world could make her love him less, shortly after the man's arrest they were divorced. Eric Koppel is currently incarcerated in a California prison, where he'll spend the rest of his days. Alright folks, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching until the end, best wishes, and I see you next time.